meeting in a physically distant manner at the Highline Hall in Wellington and District Community Center to ensure that we are able to maintain a distance of 6 feet between each other. Although it may be deceiving on live stream, I can assure you that we are at a safe distance apart. Members of committee and staff who are in attendance at Highline Hall should practice physical distancing for the duration of the meeting, including wearing your mask for any recesses and after the meeting is adjourned. Although committee is meeting in person again, the physical meetings are prohibited to the public at this time. This is necessary to maintain distancing and eliminate gathering of large groups to protect staff, committee, and the public from the spread of COVID-19. Members of the public are still able to make deputations and comments to committee electronically. Today's agenda lists all the items before committee for consideration. The recommended motions on today's agenda are shown in boldface. Copies of the agenda have been posted on our website. This meeting is being live streamed, and any participation in the meeting proceedings will become part of the public record. The recording from the meeting will be published on the county's website immediately and can be viewed by selecting live stream meetings on the bottom right of the county's homepage at thecounty.ca. Under agenda item 5, I'll be asking for comments from the audience. Members of the public who wish to provide comments at future meetings can do so by contacting clerks@pecounty.on.ca to register. Your name will be included in the committee minutes and form part of the public record posted to the county's website. We also have 3 deputations today. When you speak, please use your full name, address your comments to the chair. Following your deputation, there may be questions from members of the council. In addition, there are 2 comments from the audience on today's agenda. Any motion made at this meeting is not final until the council meeting on September 28, 2021, at which time the council may approve, amend, defer, or otherwise change the motion made by this committee. And at the end of fire, please use the applicable exits at Highline Hall or wherever you happen to be tuning in from. For those at Highline Hall, please mute and limit use of cell phones. All right. Okay, so we need to confirm agenda. Could I have somebody do that for me? Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Hirsch, if you would, sir.
Thank you, Chair. This is a Bailey-Hirsch motion that the agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting of September 16th, 2021 be confirmed.
Thank you. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. Alrighty, moving to item 3, disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Does anyone have something to declare? Seeing none, we'll now move to section 4, deputations. Our first deputation is going to be from Alan MacCharles to address the committee regarding noise concerns in Wellington. And Mr. Clerk, you're...
Through you, Chair. Harper, he's entering the meeting now. There he is.
Hello, Alan, can you hear me?
He's still connecting to the audio.
Are you there, Alan?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Alan. It's Mike Harper. I'm chairing today's meeting. Welcome. Where are you tuning in from? Are you in Canada? Where are you?
China.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome to Wellington. I don't know if you've done a deputation before. A couple of things. First of all, just if you have YouTube on, if you could mute, please. And you have 10 minutes. And over to you, sir.
Okay, well, thank you. I was hoping to use the video, but let me explain. So first off, hi, I'm Alan MacCharles. I'm the owner of 353 and 355 Wellington Main Street. And I'm just going to walk through a few of the challenges and the issues that I'm having with the neighbors, and I think probably more indirectly with the county. So I have a property immediately to the west of a residential property, which is adjacent to a motel. 353, let me explain the properties. 353 is a long-term rental unit. It's got a small family living in there. And 355 is a short-term accommodation unit. When I bought 353 about a year ago, I had a plan to build a house there for my own use when I'm done in Shanghai, which is hopefully not too long from now. But I'm facing a situation adjacent to me going east that basically makes any further investment in the property unviable. And so as I'm looking to you guys as the county and the enforcement agency, there's a couple of things that I sort of have as expectations. One, which is the property adjacent to 353, which is residential, should be residential. And we'll talk in a minute about how it's not. And the second expectation is that the county enforces its own permit zoning and bylaws. to ensure that that property is residential and the one further east of me is run in a manner that is consistent with what one would expect in a residential area. And I've lived in many places where that may not be a reasonable expectation, but I have higher expectations of the county and Canada in general to deal with this. And I'm pretty frustrated that I'm 5,000 miles away and having this discussion about a property and hearing all these issues that are coming up. So let me start with the commercial property. So I'm going 2 doors down from where my property is. We're getting ongoing complaints about noise, going from 10 a.m. until music, bass. We're getting complaints about light pollution, which is lighting up my backyard from 2 properties over, which seems a little unusual. And I'm getting complaints about air pollution, specifically around smokers, for meat running all the time or quite frequently. So let's talk about this property. And this property is clearly been overbuilt. It's being overused. My understanding is it's got a huge patio that is probably not to the permit that was granted to it. And it is a property that's being run and worked so hard that it can't safely be run from its confines, and in fact is not being run from its confines. And I'm sure there's many other violations in the other neighbors, and specifically Amy, as she gets up to talk a bit later, I'm sure we'll be a little more articulate on that. In terms of the residential property that's immediately adjacent to me, I'm having issues with delivery trucks that's being used as the delivery point for the motel. And that's not what a residential property is used for. I'm having problems with car parking, also flowing into my yard. And car parking is not what a residential property is meant to be used with, sometimes over 20 cars on that lot. It's being used for storage, and when I was last in Wellington, I could see open alcohol and other issues in unlocked containers. It's being used for food preparation, and it's also being used for waste disposal. Burning box issues adjacent to me. In the entire situation, let's just step back. I have an expectation of a sort of cottage area in a nice part of the country where retirement option is viable. And I'm dealing with a situation from 5,000 miles away that I kind of don't really expect to be dealing with. We have a residential property. I expect the residential property is used as a residential property. And I don't think when I acquired these properties that was an unreasonable expectation. And I also have an expectation that the permits that are issued by the county, if they're being violated, are enforced completely. And things like noise, light, air pollution, and other ordinances that you do have are being used. But honestly, in the situation and the property that's there, I know the sound bylaw is being reviewed and the light bylaw is being reviewed. But there are so many more practical things that should and could be done, and they're not being done. And so we got this situation where the environment's not pleasant or suitable. And it's, if I go and talk more broadly, it's having negative impact on property values of those who are adjacent to this out of control business. And so far, the only people that seem to be trying to capitalize on that are the people who are creating the situation in the first place. So I don't have a huge long deputation. That's a fairly extensive list of issues, particularly given the distance I am from it. I have I think, reasonable expectation that the county is going to come forth, look at the situation. If I can find out about the situation from where I'm at, it shouldn't be hard from Shire Hall to find out about it. And have a expectation that it's going to get dealt with. It's been going for 2 years and it's getting worse, not better. And it needs to come to a close. Those are my comments. I don't know if there are any questions or clarification.
Thank you, Alan. Let me check with the council, with the committee, to see if there's any questions for Alan MacCharles. Yes, Councillor McNaughton.
Hi, yes, thank you. I'm just wondering how many complaints have been have originated from your property that the county has received. Do you know offhand? I'm assuming the renters have been.
I don't know if they complained to the county or not. I know they have complained to me.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to know. Thanks. And you said we're going to be hearing more from Amy shortly, so I might have a couple more questions then. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor McNaughton. Anyone else? Question for Alan? Anybody on screen? Councillor Maynard, do you have a question? Hearing nothing, that's fine. Okay, Alan, thanks very much. Could I have somebody to,
We wait at the end,
Well,
after all the community comments.
we're not going to do one by one?
Oh, yes, it's deputation, sorry, yes. you're-
Yeah, sure, thanks, no problem. Okay, so I need somebody to receive the Councillor Margetson, and seconder will be McNaughton, thank you.
Yes, this is a Margetson McNaughton motion that the deputation by Alan MacCharles regarding noise concerns in Wellington be received.
Thank you. All those in favor, hands, please. And that carries. Thanks very much. All right, moving to 4.2, and Amy Bodman to address the committee on the same issue. Are you there, Amy?
Yeah, I just got on. I'm going to share my screen. Is it all right? And then I'll start as soon as my screen is shared. Is
That's
that all
fine.
right?
Yep, just a quick reminder, YouTube must be off, and you've got 10 minutes, and I'll let you know about a minute or so before the end. Thanks.
I just muted it. Of course, it's a delay, so I didn't realize that you guys are further along and it's appearing on YouTube. So I'll share my screen.
Okay, we can see it.
Okay?
Yep.
Start.
10 minutes you've got. Thanks, Amy.
Hello, my name is Amy Bodman. Thank you to the Honorable Mayor, the Chair, and to Council for hearing my deputation. I live at 361 Main Street, Wellington, and also own 359 Main Street, which we rent out as a long-term rental. Each of my property contains a cottage. The 359 cottage is rented out as a seasonal STA. The other is not. I am speaking today on behalf of myself and my neighbors who live directly west of the Lakeside Motel. Over the last 2 years, we have been in contact with our councilor and county staff concerning nuisance issues due to the expanded Lakeside Motel. These include breach of privacy, excessive noise, light pollution, smoke pollution, and bylaw and permit infractions. These nuisance issues not only adversely affect our livability of place, but also the small businesses, our long and short-term rentals some of us run. The concerns detailed here have been addressed several times in writing to the CBO, the CAO, the fire chief, and our councilor. I regret to say that we have received little substantive response. Today we are bringing forward several questions and concerns, but first, some context. The Lakeside Motel's master business license describes it as a motel. However, the Lakeside also runs an outdoor bar restaurant at the south third of its property, right on the lake where noise carries most. Motels, as defined by our comprehensive zoning bylaw, are allowed to have facilities for the serving of meals for the traveling public, presumably the patrons of the motel. However, though the liquor license application indicates its main business is a motel, the bar restaurant the Lakeside runs is a big bar restaurant, accommodating way more people than it can house in its motel rooms. Based on the number of umbrellas that we can count in this bar restaurant section, the restaurant has table seating for more than 150 people. In the section of the property the bar restaurant occupies, its liquor license allows it to serve liquor to 230 patrons at a time. The whole property itself is licensed to serve 400. This is an outdoor bar restaurant that runs over 12 hours a day, every day of the week. Advertised on its website as the largest outdoor patio in Prince Edward County, placed in the middle of a residential neighborhood with multiple residences within 250 meters of it. It is also a bar restaurant that over this present season has functioned very much like an outdoor nightclub, broadcasting music and noise for over 10 hours a day that at times has been so loud it is audible 7 properties away, with bass shaking the ground. The east and north boundaries of the motel property are enclosed by a sizable wall that buffers the residential properties on both sides from much of the nuisance, though not all of it. The west side of the property, however, lacks the wall. We believe no wall was built because the motel owner owns the first residential property west of the motel, 351 Main Street. Though zoned residential, it is now being used to support the commercial operations of the expanded motel and its massive bar restaurant. It is clear to us on the west side that the motel needs 351 Main Street to help support it because the commercial property itself is not big enough to accommodate the operation of the businesses it is running. Does the motel and the bar restaurant it is operating conform to its current zoning? Highway commercial or CH zoning requires that 70% of its property be free of structures, excluding driveways, parking areas, and walkways. According to our bylaw, a structure shall mean anything constructed or erected, the use of which requires a location on or in the ground, or attached to something having a location on the ground. When the CBO, Public Health, and Fire Chief signed their agency letters of approval for the liquor license, they signed on a plan that looked like this. It included lot coverage of a maximum of 30% required by the zoning. Here's the pool here, it actually was built here, and the restaurant spans this entire area. Since then, numerous structures have been added to the space. A deck much bigger than what was drawn, decks added to the pool, 4 glamping tents mounted on platforms, boardwalks, numerous cargo containers converted into outbuildings, including this one that has been converted into a room, an outdoor kitchen, at least 1 outdoor bar back here, at least 50 umbrellas attached to the ground, tables, benches, fire pits, fences, walls, and other structures, including the pool itself. Is 70% of the property still free of structures as required by the zoning? The Lakeside website boasts of amenities like a restaurant, bar, pool, sauna and lounge, spa services, bike rental, beach access, canoe rental, none of which are mentioned in the definition of a motel or hotel in the bylaw, yet they do fit into the definition of a resort. CH zoning does not allow a resort. Tourist commercial does. For CH zoning, requirements for parking, driveway, and loading follow commercial regulations, which require a loading area off of the main street and parking for its uses. Right now, deliveries get made on Main Street. Restaurants require parking in a commercial zone. Does the Lakeside Motel conform to its current zoning? Has a patio been built in accordance with its permits? When CBO Harrison signed off on the liquor license in June 2019, the Lakeside Motel had already received a permit from Quincy Conservation to build a patio. What was permitted was this: 2 small decks on either side at either end of the property. This is very different than the larger one. The larger deck the CBO signed off on. What was built was something else altogether, spanning the whole back boundary of the property. The Quincy Conservation Permit, CC Peter Moyer states, this permit is granted provided that all works are completed in accordance with the specifications of plans set out in the application. They clearly are not. It also states, you are reminded that the granting of this permit does not remove your responsibility to obtain any necessary additional permits from other agencies or government bodies. Have all necessary additional permits been obtained to run an operation of the size? Are permits necessary, for instance, for the outdoor kitchen, the fire pits, for ventilation and use of the smokers, all of which appear to have been built within the expanded patio? We ask again, has the patio been built in accordance with its permits? And if not, is it legal? Is 351 Main Street zoned residential being used illegally as an extension of the motel for which is zoned commercial? For the past 2 years, the residential property has been used as the back alley to the restaurant. This year, they even built a stairway between the 2 properties. Serving and maintenance staff use these stairs continually during open hours. The service vehicles goes up and down the property all day and evening walk. This cargo container, here stores the restaurant's refrigerator. Other containers on the residential property have been used to store alcohol and motel equipment over the winter. Wood and propane tanks used for the motel and restaurant are stored right next to the stairway. Spotlights, presumably lighting this back alley for restaurant staff, shine into the western properties all night long. On any given day during high season, there are at least 10 cars parked at the back end of the residential property, sometimes double parked. This in addition to the many other cars parked on the front half of the property. The motel owner may claim that these cars are parked due to construction, but then how do you explain that the cars are there on the weekends and constantly changing? For over 2 years, a motorhome longer than 6 meters has been parked on residential property. Together with the main house, it is used to house the owner and numerous motel employees. It is not being used for construction. Now there's another house being built. Is it properly permitted, and what is its purpose? Is 351 Main Street, a residential property, being used illegally? Has a proper site plan ever been done on a motel property to account for the expansion of the motel capacity, which now includes the original 10-room motel, 2 houses that have been converted for accommodation, 4 glamping tents, and a cargo container bunkie, basically doubling its capacity, as well as for the outdoor bar restaurant that can serve 230 people at a time.
Amy, you have about 1 minute left.
And serve liquor to 400 people at once. Isn't rezoning required, which is granted, would also necessitate a site plan? Can a fire truck even get down to the bar restaurant where a fire should break out? What triggers a site plan, and why hasn't one been required? Site plans protect neighborhoods from nuisance. They ensure that properties are safe with ample loading areas, adequate parking for guests and staff, fire lanes, and buffers to protect the privacy of nearby properties. They ensure that the operations they are planning to run can fit in the property they are zoned for. A site plan would protect our property from nuisances. Finally, we appreciate the fact that the Lakeside Motel has employed many people, many of them young, a lot from the county, who need these jobs, especially after COVID. We appreciate that the motel owner has worked hard to create a thriving business. We are aware that the owner has spent a great deal of money getting building, renovation, and demolition permits. These were all granted one by one, with a blind eye towards what the sum of their uses indicate overall in terms of zoning. Therefore, I respectfully request that council direct staff to investigate and report on these questions and concerns and any others that arise involving the Lakeside Motel. I had to miss a few sentences there, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Thank you, Amy. Looking around committee for questions. Kate McNaughton, yes?
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. This is rather more complete picture and somewhat and does to me bear investigation to understand what's desirable in the area and what isn't. So when the time comes to receive it, I'll probably be looking for support for a report to come back to us to assess the situation. Is there anything that, is there sort of, can you think of, just as far as thinking about things like the activities going down closer to the water, are there any sort of quick fixes that you could imagine that could make life a little bit more livable?
I think that sound shouldn't run as late as it does, noise. I think that the commercial property should not be being used as an extension. I mean, the residential property should not be being used as an extension of the commercial property. I think the restaurant should be a whole lot smaller, so whatever is cooked or prepared or delivered there is done on that property. And I think, you know, I read the draft noise bylaw. It doesn't deal with the fact that noise really carries across the lake.
Yes.
I also think that smokers need to be looked at. Sometimes the smoke gets so bad in my house, and I'm 5 doors away, but it gets carried by the smoke that my eyes burn because we don't have air conditioning on the 2nd floor where the bedrooms are. You know, so it really is. And at times the music was so loud when I was cleaning my little cottage 5 doors away, with all the windows closed and the air conditioning on. You could feel the bass coming through the floor. I mean, this is too loud.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm not sure our noise bylaw really will deal with this stuff, so it's an issue. But I really do think a buffer, here's the last one, a buffer along the west side would make a big deal of difference.
I was wondering if that might be sort of top of the list. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, sorry.
Other committee members? Question for Amy? Councillor Hirsch, you look like you've got one, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I find this to be a bit of a shocking situation that we seem to have allowed this to get to the extent that it has and become the problem that it has. It reminds me of the water park issue we had in Sheba's Island, that just over time something expands beyond the point of being reasonable. I think Ms. Bodman has raised a very complete collection of issues concerning permitting, bylaw, enforcement, zoning. Is the zoning appropriate? Are the owners operating the way they should? So I would also support the idea then of requesting a report from staff to investigate and report on all the various issues that came out of this presentation. So I would second, if Councillor McNaughton wants to make that motion, I would second it, or I can make the motion, it doesn't matter.
Okay, we'll get to that in a sec, just to give the committee a chance. Anyone else have a question for Ms. Bodman? Mayor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Amy, for the deputation. You're a very complete deputation. I've got a question as to whether there's been conversation with the owners and how those have gone, and you know, if there's any sequence you can provide as to the frequency of those conversations and what the outcome might have been.
Yeah, so last year in 2019, the first time, I think it was probably 2018, when the motel owner was drilling for her well. I had guests staying in our little cottage. It started, you know, bright and early on a Monday morning. These people had a little baby. And so mine is rented out for Airbnb. Airbnb contacted me. I was actually out birding. And I called the motel. We had motel owner, we had a decent conversation. She told me how long it would be going. At that point, you know, I asked her, and then we went back and forth, and you know, the couple decided to stay because, anyway, I can go on, but that turned out okay. And then I did ask the motel owner what her plans were. She said she was drilling for a pool, and that she'd be building a small patio, which would be a little bar, which would run from 4 o'clock till 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock, about 4 hours a day. I thought that was okay. And then what happened is that this petition went around for the liquor license, and after much thought, and you all know I have a lot of experience with this kind of thing because I fought a lot of you know, development or through the field naturalist, you know, I decided, you know what, if she gets the zoning, if she gets a liquor license, it's very hard to draw it back. So I signed the petition. And then I wasn't even aware when the petition went through, but what happened next was that suddenly there was a very loud party at the Lakeside Hotel. I was at my neighbor's house across the street from the Legion, and the music was blaring so loudly their house shook, and then it stopped at 1 minute to 11. So the next morning I called the motel owner and just asked her what was going on, and she said, when I heard your name read out loud, I decided to show you what I can do. But then we had a longer conversation, calmed her down. She said, you know, you moved here to run your business. Then I explained to her that I didn't, that I actually bought the house next door to make sure it didn't turn into an SDA since we shared the driveway, blah, blah, blah. And actually it ended up pretty pleasantly. I asked her, you know, maybe she could have a glass of wine sometime. I could show her my little monkey that I rent out. Then what happened is that the next year she built this pool and there was no break. So this is 2020, last year. There was no buffer at all between the pool and the whole side beyond the motel to our property. So it was like people were staring at me from the pool all summer long. And so I asked her, this is all by text, asked her to come over to my property because I wanted to show her what we saw to see if she could put up, see if we could start dealing with those things. I didn't tell her why I wanted her to come. I said that there were some issues. I wanted to show them to her to see if we could work out something that would work out decently. So 3 times she agreed to come, and all 3 times she canceled at the last minute. And then she asked me to send it by email. I said I really wanted her to come to the property. The 3rd time she canceled, I asked her if she was ever planning to come. I wrote her pretty politely. I just said, are you ever planning to come? And she wrote back and said, I don't like your tone. If you have a problem, send me an email. So I didn't do that. I decided, okay, that stops the communication. So then I did hire a lawyer to get help me with the Freedom of Information Act, and he wrote a letter to the Lakeside Hotel lawyer asking them to please put up a buffer that would deal with that we believe would deal with the nuisance issues. It's a very polite letter. We asked for the buffer, which we felt would deal with light and sound pollution. We never got a response. She did put up trees along the pool this year, which made that a bit better. And so since then, I haven't contacted her again. All of my issues, and she didn't answer the letter, and she, was rude to me the last time we had a text, I've just put with bylaw, with Councillor Harper over and over and over again, with bylaw, the CAO, and that's what I've done. Does that answer your question?
In a word, yes, it does. Thank you.
That's the whole history from my point of view. Okay.
Okay, any other final chance, committee members, any other questions for Amy? And then we're going to go to Kate McNaughton, Councillor McNaughton, who I believe has an amendment for, Chad, just
Sure.
for procedural, we'll first get the amendment, vote on that, and then the whole thing, right?
Correct.
Go ahead.
I can put it on the floor if you want.
Yep.
Okay, and I think if Councillor Hirsch wants to second it, that the deputation by Emmy Bodman regarding nuisance bylaw and possible permit infractions be received, and that council directs staff to return with a staff report. Period. I don't think we need to.
Okay, so first we'll vote on in that staff return with the
I
report.
think we need stronger language with regards to the staff report.
Okay.
We need to indicate what
So-
we're looking for staff to do.
Return, so do you have suggestions?
Regarding noise and nuisance at the Lakeside Motel,
Excellent.
Okay, if I could just add to that, I think, Kate, and zoning was the other one I think that we probably want to put in there based on what we've heard. So do you want to, Chad, do you want to, or do you want Councillor McNaughton just to reread, so we'll vote on that amendment piece first, right?
yeah, we'll vote on the amendment first, and then we'll vote on the motion as carried.
Right, so, Councillor Nyman?
I got a question on the amendment.
Okay, go.
I've got a question on the amendment. So, we're looking at noise, but it seems to me that the noise stops within the permitted time, so I'm not sure what we're asking for the report for.
May I?
Please.
Thank you. Well, it would just be to look and understand what complaints have been made, and it wouldn't just be regarding noise, it would be regarding all of the nuisances and potential compliance with various bylaws and zoning that we've heard about. So it's to get a somewhat clearer understanding from the municipality's perspective of what works within the various parameters set out for this property and what doesn't.
Okay, so I'm just going to jump in here. So the way it's currently written now, the motion is regarding nuisance bylaw, possible permit infractions be received. So we've kind of identified the issues in that. So it's
And
about
zoning.
receive, pardon?
And zoning.
And zoning. So what we need is a staff report on these issues, including zoning. How about something like that?
That would work, Councillor.
Are we good on that? Councillor St. Jean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be more comfortable if it was more specific to the properties, including the residential property that Ms. Bodman has stated is being potentially being used not in a residential matter. So I believe the zoning, the investigation into the appropriate uses and compliance on the zoning should apply to both properties.
Okay,
Site
so
plan.
we need to just...
I'd rather this be very specific.
That's fine, I agree. So we want to say in that motion, the amendment would reference the addresses of the two properties.
That would be correct.
And they are what, for somebody? Amy, can you tell us again, what are the numbers on the street?
349 Main Street and 351 Main Street.
351?
Yeah.
Okay, so
349.
all right, so the amendment piece would be a staff report regarding these issues as well as zoning for both properties at 349 and 351 Main. Good with that? Are we all good with that? Councillor Prinzen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question might be to the CAO, but I'm having a hard time understanding what we're asking for here. Is if bylaw's been in contact, shouldn't bylaw be looking at this without a staff report coming to council? Because the next thing you know, and I sympathize with them and I understand what's going on, but the next thing you know is somebody that's having a problem with the neighbors and bylaws coming and asking for a staff report. So I need some more clarity before I'll vote in favor of it, because if bylaw's been in touch with them, bylaw should be enforcing the rules without all the nuts and bolts coming through a staff report to council for us to sit here and say, well, bylaw is not doing their job or bylaw is doing their job. So if you could clarify, I just don't want to cross that line between us being council and us being in bylaw and enforcement, and that's my worry with this amendment on the motion.
Madam CEO?
Through the mayor to Councillor Prinzen, I think the way I'm seeing this is that this is council saying that bylaw hasn't done what they need to do and is asking bylaw to revisit the matter in the context of the complaints received. So I certainly don't see this as a best practice, but I don't see another way to achieve the outcome that council's discussing and debating right now.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can follow up to that, if I don't see it as a best practice either, and that's why I'm having a hard time. I think this discussion is enough to say to bylaw, maybe bylaw, you're not doing your job. And I'm not saying they are or they aren't. That's bylaw works under the CAO, and as far as I'm concerned, we're responsible for the CAO. So I'm going to leave it at that. But I respect, and I know issues, and it's not my neighbor. And by the sounds of Ms. Bodman's deputation, I'm glad it's not my neighbor. But I think we have to be careful the lines that we're doing and the roles that we're playing. So for those reasons, I won't support the amendment, but I'll accept the deputation and hope bylaw gets the point of this meeting.
Thanks, Councillor Prinzen. Back to the CAO.
So through the chair to council and Councillor Prinzen, I understand what you mean now. The alternative you might have if you don't want to see the report coming back is that you could direct staff to revisit this matter as it relates to, and then it would be left to senior staff and myself to resolve the matter. So there is a way to flag this as something that needs to be looked into without bringing a report back. That's the will of council.
Point of order, just not to it's.
Yes, Councillor McNaughton, go ahead.
So we don't have the capacity to do that under our procedural bylaw. We can only request a staff report. While we would potentially, in a case like this, like to send a direction to staff just to say, please have a second look. This is our only mechanism to do that. And we have, at this time, it really isn't, what we're hearing from community members is bylaw's not doing their job, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we as a council believe that. This would be simply, please go look. Unfortunately, we don't have a mechanism, so what we're left with is our one way to do that with a deputation, which is a staff report.
Okay, I'm going to turn to the clerk. Chad, how would you like to resolve this?
Through you, the chair, Councillor McNaughton is correct. There's one of two things that council can do, or the committee can do with the deputation, is receive the deputation for information and ask for a staff report.
Okay, so we'll go back to the amendment we were trying to work, which is to receive a report regarding these matters as listed in the first part, including zoning as it relates to 349 and 351 Main Street. That's the amendment.
That's
okay,
correct.
So I'm going to call the vote on the amendment. Are you cool with that, Councillor McNaughton? That
I
amendment?
am.
Okay, so let's have a vote on the amendment first. All those in favor of the amendment, show of hands, please. And that carries. Thank you. So we'll now do the full motion. And Chad, do you want to read that out, what you have there, sir? Or how would you like to do that?
Yes, just give me a second. So what we have here is that the deputation by Amy Bodman regarding nuisance bylaw and personal permit infractions be received, and that council directs staff to return with a staff report regarding these issues, including zoning as it relates to 349 and 351 Wellington Main Street.
I think that accurately captures what we're talking about. You fine with that? Everyone good with that? Okay, could we vote on the amended motion, please? All those in favor?
You need a mover and a seconder.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Thank you.
I thought John and I were moving and seconding.
Okay, that was the amendment. I think Councillor Bailey's correct, Amendo. So I see, who would like to move that whole thing? Councillor Margetts is going to move it, seconded by Councillor Roberts. All right, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right, so thank you, Amy, for your time. We're going to move to 4.3, item 4.3, which is Tim Good's going to address the committee regarding whole home STA. Is Mr. Good in the room? Tim, can you hear me? Tim?
still connecting to audio.
Still connecting, thanks. You there, Tim?
Through the chair to Tim, if you can hear me, you need to connect to the audio on Zoom. In the bottom left-hand corner of the Zoom call, if you can hear me, just click on that area and just say connect through your computer audio, please. Mr. Good, if you can hear me, can you please raise your hand?
Nope. Ah, dear. Hold up a note in front of the camera, Chad. Just try calling in. Where, look?
Tim, we can see you, but we can't hear you.
It's looking good, though.
Tim, can you hear us?
Tim, if you can hear or see us, can you please raise your right hand?
If you can't, raise your left hand.
Yeah.
Use the chat function. Use the chat function.
We can see you. We're watching. Yeah. There's 10 minutes left. Yeah. He's got a bandwidth problem. Yeah.
Let me see. Do you want me to see if I can call him?
Yeah.
Okay, I sent him an email.
Looks like he's typing. You guys are in touch?
So we're sending him an email as we speak.
Yep. Just to throw a thought out there, Mr. Clerk, do we want to try to get him to work on that and do the comments and get him set up and we can come back to him?
We would need to amend the agenda to do that. I would recommend if he doesn't come soon, we reschedule him, and Ann and I will reach out to him
Very
and
good.
give him some.
Your call.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. He called on his cell phone. Just give me a second. Things you don't know. Hello, Tim. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Tim, welcome. Okay, thanks for your presence today, Tim. Mike Harper here, chairing today's committee meeting. Just a couple of things before you go. You will have 10 minutes. First thing, though, is if you have YouTube on, could you please turn it off so we don't get the feedback? So no YouTube for the moment. And you have 10 minutes, sir, and I'll give you a little heads up when you get close to your 10 if you need it. And here we go. The floor is yours. 10 minutes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're good, sir. Away you go.
Okay. My name is Tim Good, and I'm here to thank you for your time today. I'm here today representing the bulk of the residents on Mary Avenue in Wellington to discuss full home SDA and our issues around them. Mary Avenue, in case you don't know, is on the west side of Wellington. It's a dead-end street. The consists of 9 homes. Over the past few years, the community's been very tight. We all know each other, we get together, it's a very tight community. We have basically being on a dead street, it's also a great place for our kids to play and our grandkids to play. We've never had to worry about noise or traffic. In the past few years, we've had full-home STAs move into the area, and houses have turned over. To the point now where on Mary Avenue, we have 3 full-home STAs. So out of the 9 homes that exist on the street, 3 of them are now full-home STAs. They are grandfathered full-home STAs. One of the, just to give you an idea of the size of the STAs that we're talking about, one of them is licensed for 3 bedrooms, one is licensed for 5 bedrooms. The other one is under review and going for a license that we understand is for 7 bedrooms. Combination of bedrooms from the 3 STAs on our street now equals the other 6 resident bedroom size combined. So it is a significant issue for us. I want to go over it. So I want to keeping on the idea of the size of the case. With Mary Avenue is a typical residential street. It is small homes, 1,500 square feet, usually with a family of 3 or 4 people. That's what they are meant to be. Having something the size of 5 bedroom and 7 bedroom STA, as you can imagine, does not reflect the essence of the street. It's not, I'm sure that wasn't the intention when STAs first came into the area, but that's what it's gotten to. The problem right now is what we're asking for from, as far as size, what we're asking for council to recognize is size of these STAs, if we have to live with them, and I don't think there's any immediate solution for eliminating STAs. So if we have to live with STAs long term, then we should be aware of the size of the STAs. Use that as some sort of a guidance as to which ones fit into the community and which ones don't, and work on reducing the size of the ones that don't. Of course, that would eliminate a lot of things I'm sure you hear about that the people on Mary Avenue are experiencing well. This is where noise complaints come into problems, traffic issues come into problems. We have a large number of cars that we never had before. We have buses from the wineries picking up large groups. We have limousines, that sort of thing. So what I'm saying today, I'm sure is not a shock to you. I'm sure what I'm telling you is that this on Mary Avenue actually exists around the time. So I'm sure it's not something that will surprise you. So as far as size goes, it has we're asking council to acknowledge that the size of the SBA should be something that we should be considered long term if necessary for SBA to exist within our community. Next, I want to get into the tools that we have in order to deal with SBA. Right now, under development, or maybe we're further down the road than we understand, we have different processes that are being developed within the processing groups at Shad Hall. We've had dealings with those processing groups, I think run by Todd Davis. And first thing I want to talk about is the grandfathering process. So what we understand the grandfathering process to be is if you existed prior to October 2018, whatever you had prior to October 2018 as far as in the whole STA, and whatever number of bedrooms you had, how you were operating, will remain, provided that you check off the boxes and you meet all the requirements to get your license. Our understanding is that was developed, that process was developed around the provincial guideline, which is the Planning Act, stating that no new bylaw can impede on the activities of a property prior to the bylaw being implemented. While we understand that, don't think that was the intention of the bylaw going back to when it was created. The Planning Act, I'm sure, never had to put thought into home STAs when it was developed. So what we're asking for council as far as the grandfathering process goes is hopefully there can be no robust process there when they're looking to grandfather, when we're looking to grandfather an STA, to do whatever we can to, again, limit the size of the STAs or try to get them to fit better into the community. The example that we have on area, the one STA that is going forward is 7 bedroom license. What we've understood through communication with the licensee much because a lot of it is confidential, but what we know about One Mary Avenue, the residents of the community, is One Mary Avenue was a 3-bedroom home when it was sold and became an MTA. Somewhere along the way, it went from a 3-bedroom house to a 7-bedroom house, which is what they're trying to get grandfathered. We hope that the grandfathering process would have some sort of checks and balances in place and robustness to ensure that what people are telling you they had prior to October 2018 is what actually existed prior to 2018. If not, then the grandfathering process needs some revisions and needs to be more robust. Next, I want to talk about the licensing process. The licensing process, what we understand, and going through with the teams at Shire Hall, we understand that the license is actually attached to the property and it's not attached to the owner. This will cause a lot of issues, probably has already caused some issues that you're probably aware of. But licenses will be sold, are being sold, along with the STA. So I think you probably seen it in the paper, and sure if you go through local papers today, you'll see home STAs advertising that they have grandfathered STAs for the license, and we're selling them that way. This has resulted in premiums on those properties and artificially inflating the housing market within the county. An example is what happened on Mary Avenue. 9 Mary Avenue was sold recently. And back when 9 Mary Avenue privately held, that house, they were 4 years ago, they were struggling probably for 500,000 or 600,000 for the house. But it's the whole home at 5 bedrooms with a licensed grandfather. They were able to manage to get $1.1 million for that house. There's no way to increase the value of that home. I could simply the market, which raised it down, of course, 30 or 40% increase in value. But the license that went along with that house, obviously the customer base and everything else, making it a fully functional MTA, got a premium for that. This will be an issue everywhere in the county, I'm sure. This is not just related to Mary Avenue, as I said. But what we've asked the Grafton County to do, if ever there was a time where we need some sort of legal input from other communities around us, such as Belleville, that's currently going through the same processes we're going through, or working with our provincial counterparts to somehow get this changed, not in our power to change it immediately, and get the license at least associated with the owner and not with the property, so that at license review, it gives you a tool to at least say, we have some way of working to get rid of some of the STAs, if they're bad STAs, based on noise complaints and everything else. It gives you some sort of tool to at least deal with the large number that we currently have.
Tim, you got about a minute left.
I want to really quickly talk about enforcement. Enforcement is the third thing that you have, and of course that the three need to tie together to be robust. Enforcement, licensing, and the grandfathering process all need to tie together to be a robust process. Finally, I want to mention communication, because that's important. We've been working on our processes, my understanding, 3 or 4 years we've been working on it. We'd like to ask council for a communication plan to talk about where we stand and where we're going with the FTA processes that are under development. If you could come up with some sort of communication plan and start communicating to the community, I think you would find it would help with similar discussions and complaints, similar to what I've written to you today. So if we understand what's going on, I think we'd have a better appreciation and of where we think the future will be with these whole MTAs and the impact on their market. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. All right, so hang in there. We'll see if there are some questions from committee members. Somebody have a question for Tim. Councillor McNaughton.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. And thank you for coming to speak to us today, Mr. Good. So just to clarify a couple of things so that you know, because clearly we are not communicating well enough, we actually are looking to review our entire sort of how our program works because we, as a council, I can't speak for all of council, just myself as a councillor, but we did undertake an effort to open the bylaw back up and have a look at how it's working real time and in real neighborhoods, and make sure that it's that we do all we can to make it fit with our community within the room we have to tailor the bylaw accordingly. We are limited by the province, and the Planning Act and legislation in general really doesn't legally allow us to do perhaps as much as we would like to do with the grandfathering of properties, etc. However, I certainly hope, as one individual councillor, that we're going to be able to look at restructuring the program to favor residents and to favor neighborhoods, so that they have fewer conflicts with this type of business in a residential neighborhood. So, and just to clarify one thing, the licenses are tied to the owners of the home, but the usage is what gets grandfathered from owner to owner. So the licenses don't actually transfer, but the effect is exactly the same as you've outlined. It does put a premium on certain homes that do have this permission attached to it already, and that I think we would all agree could cause, does cause problems, but that is one of the limits of provincial legislation. But this was a really good way to sort of, I appreciate you coming, because it was a very good way to sort of illustrate how it sort of impacts one very small little neighborhood when you've got such a preponderance of STAs. That's a fairly high percentage. I think your little street would be protected from any further whole home STAs being added, because already, even if we don't end the practice of having whole home STAs, which is my hope, then we, at the very least, there is an existing cap on the density with which those whole home STAs can inhabit a neighborhood, and I believe yours would be beyond capacity already. But thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing these concerns and illustrating it so clearly.
All right, any other questions? Any other questions from committee members for Tim regarding his experience on Mary Ave? Councillor St. Jean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll stick to a question. With regards to the housing there, I can't find it in the written copy. Are you on municipal septic or private septic? Private?
Private septic.
Okay. And
Which makes it even worse for the size of the SDA that we're talking about.
okay, and you're aware that the septic, there are requirements for the size of septic systems to be able to handle the number of bedrooms regardless of whether they're grandfathered?
Yes.
Okay. I thank you for answering those two questions.
All right, anybody else have a question for Tim? All right, seeing none, could I have someone move to receive Tim's deputation, please? Councillor McMahon, and seconded by Councillor Roberts. If you would, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a McMahon-Roberts motion that the deputation of Tim Good regarding resident concerns regarding whole home STAs be received.
Very good, thank you. All those in favor? Hands up, and that carries. Thank you very much, and thank you, Tim, for coming today. All right, we're going to move on now to item 5, comments from the audience. We have 2 today. The first one will be with Mark Tao. Do we know what item he's speaking to? Are you there, Mark?
Yes, I am, yes.
Okay, so thanks for joining us. Just hold on one second. Just which item are you speaking to today, please, Mark?
Just briefly to item 6.1, and I'm really only here to help answer questions that may arise. I think that was more my intention in terms of participation in the meeting. So.
Okay, so the procedure is you've got 3 minutes, Mark, if you'd like to speak to the issue. That's how it works. This is your chance to say something. Otherwise, once we get to it, we'll be just discussing it among the committee members. So if you have some thoughts you'd like to convey, you've got 3 minutes, sir. And if you could turn YouTube off in case you have it on.
Thank you, yes. Yeah, so just with respect to the road assumption and the H-lift, just support staff support, or the staff report with respect to providing access, legal road access to this property and also to the neighboring properties who have the benefit of access over the subject property. So the intention here is to provide that access that at some point historically was understood to be provided, but due to some errors in older surveys, the road frontage that was thought to be had historically was found not to actually exist. And so this application will allow that frontage and that access to be created and for the existing shared, essentially private driveway to be used by the subject property for potentially a single detached dwelling at some point in the future, but also just to allow for that long-standing private driveway, shared driveway, to continue to be there and to provide that access over the road allowance and over the subject property. So that was everything. So I thank staff for their time and attention to the file, and I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, very good, sir. Hold on a sec. I'll just check with committee members have any questions for you. All right, seeing none. Thanks very much for your time today, Mark. All right, so we have a second comment, and I'm going to be reading this on behalf of the resident, whose name is Sharon Harrison. And I will time myself, so just give me a second to get set up here. And I don't know how I'm going to call myself if I go over, but hopefully I'll be able to figure that out. But anyway, I timed it, so we should be good. So here we go. All right, again, Sharon Harrison, who is a resident of Wellington. As a 17-year permanent resident of 350 Main Street, Wellington, I reside directly across from Lakeside Motel located at 349 and 351 Main Street. Enjoyment and use of my property has been severely compromised in recent years due to numerous issues arising from the significant change of use at the motel into a resort-type business attracting hundreds of patrons daily. As a professional writer working from a private home-based office meeting deadlines 7 days a week, the ability to operate my business has been severely disrupted. The main points of concern include excessive noise, light pollution, traffic congestion, parking, and deliveries/unloading. The road in front of the motel is not a parking lot, a bus or coach terminus, a taxi rank, or a limousine drop-off, nor is it suited to unloading and deliveries which occur on a daily basis. Motel patrons use the road and the sidewalk to park, including my driveway, impeding sight lines and causing severe traffic congestion. Cars are double and triple parked in front of the motel. The associated traffic chaos from hundreds of cars daily using these properties with vehicles parking, waiting, turning, and maneuvering on this busy highway is unsafe. Factor in the presence of large delivery vehicles unloading, I've witnessed 4 at any one time, and it's becoming dizzying, chaotic congestion all day, every day. The issue is out of control. I witnessed one traffic accident recently. I've seen countless near misses. Excessive noise includes blaring music from 7 a.m. to 11 daily and noise from vehicles and people. 351 has undergone a recent expansion with the construction of an additional structure as part of the motel resort complex, despite its, I believe, residential zoning. The sleepy 10-bed motel was morphed into a sprawling and ever-growing resort, complete with large swimming pool and very large patio restaurant and bar. To insert a resort complex into the footprint of a small motel in such close proximity to residential neighboring properties is unacceptable. Allowing hundreds of people to descend on this property without adequate parking and knowing the associated noise and disruption such numbers bring shows little regard to those living close by as does not being consulted about such extensive changes to use. The operation of this business goes beyond the bounds and regular operation of a 10-bed motel and does not fit into a quiet residential neighborhood. I ask that council and staff take a serious look at what has been allowed to occur here and re-examine carefully what is appropriate use of these properties as it relates to zoning, noise, and neighbors. And I understand that Sharon is online and she is willing to take some questions if there are any. Do we know, Mr. Clerk, if Sharon is online?
Through you, Chair Harper, I believe she is the phone number in the Zoom call right now.
Sharon, can you hear me? Hello, Sharon, you there?
Hi, yes, I am.
All right, just hold on, thank you. I've read your comments, and I'm now going to just canvass the committee members to see if anyone has a question for you. Yeah, committee, any questions for Sharon? Sharon, I don't see any hands, so I guess your comments were sufficient. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for coming and being here with us today. So at this point, then, I will ask for someone to move that we receive the comments from the audience. Could I have someone do that for me? Councillor Prinzen, and seconded by Councillor Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a Prinzen-Nyman motion that we now receive the comments from the audience.
Thanks very much. All those in favor, hands up, and that carries. Thanks very much. Okay, thanks again, Sharon. All right, folks, we're now going to move to items for consideration, and we'll start with 6.1. I need somebody to put this on the floor. Councillor Hirsch, does he have a seconder? Councillor Margetson, if you would, Mr. Hirsch. Councillor Hirsch, read that for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a Hirsch-Margetson motion that council receive report DS 190/2021 regarding removal of H hold application file number Z66-21 and road assumption bylaw for information, and that zoning file number Z67-21 for lands described, part Lot A, concession south of Prince Edward Bay, parts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 47R, 5215, STPE 11979 in the ward of South Marysburg be approved, and 3, that council approve the proposed road assumption bylaw to assume part 4 on 47R-9180 into the County Road 13 road allowance.
Okay, did you want to speak to that, sir?
Yeah, I could speak to this briefly. This has been a fascinating subject. If council looks at James's report, and James Griffin has done quite a good report, there's a photograph showing this entrance. There's a sort of a grassy knoll and a gravel roadway. All that's being requested in assuming about 50 feet of the road allowance is essentially that the grassy knoll and that gravel entrance become legal, because they're not at the present time. And it's a curious and rather humorous event that gravel driveway currently leads down to the home of Paul and Joyce Meinecker, who is a former South Marysburg Township councillor. So I'm sure Joyce will be pleased to know that her entrance is finally going to become legal when we do this. There's no cost to the county. There's no road improvement to be done. It's just to legalize the sort of the currently existing situation, and then it allows the property owner to remove the H from the small piece of land at the bottom of their property where they wish to eventually build a small house. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hirsch. We'll do questions and comments, and Councillor Bailey is next.
Thank you, Chair. James, just for the sake of clarity, I believe I read in the report that this does not allow an assumption on the part of the Flat Point subdivision application to have access through that.
Go ahead, James.
Thank you. Through the chair, no, it does not. It should be noted that these lands, a portion of these lands are part of the Flat Point subdivision application that has been received and deemed complete by the planning division. However, these lands are not a part of that application, and through this, through the removal of the hold and the assumption of this, it would not allow for further, it does not, has no sort of bearing bearings on the application that we have in our office right now for that zone.
Thanks, James.
Follow-up, we good? Any other questions from the committee?
No.
Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much, all. Concerned on that one? All right, moving right along, we're at 6.2. Board of Development Services Department regarding noise bylaws. Somebody want to put this on the floor? Councilor McMahon, and I need a seconder, someone there? Yes, Councilor St. Jean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. McMahon St. Jean motion that council receive report DS-177-2020 for information, and two, that the bylaw number 900-2002 is amended, known as noise bylaw, be rescinded, and the three, the proposed draft noise bylaw as listed on this agenda be approved at a future meeting of council.
Very good, sir. All right. Questions, comments? We've got Councilor Bailey. Will start us off, if you would, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Mike, I think this one might go to you. Under exceptions, F and H, I have a constituent who does lawn service in the summer and snow plowing in the winter. Are those two aspects applicable to him? F is the operation of domestic power tools, chainsaw, chipper, leaf blower, lawn equipment, and H is street sweeper, snow removal.
Through your chair, yes, it would.
Thank you.
All right, good. Anyone else have a question on this, on the motion? Seeing none. There I see Councillor Maynard. We now have her in her full color glory. Okay, Councillor Maynard.
Sorry for joining remotely. In the noise bylaw, we have the restriction of outdoor amplified music currently from 11 till I think 9 the next day. And if I can get a seconder, I'm going to suggest that we amend Schedule A and add that outdoor amplified music or entertainment emanating from a commercial establishment in a residential area be from 9 p.m. of one day to 11 a.m. of the next day. And I say that because across the county, as patios seem to become more and more popular, and often in close relationship to residential areas, not talking about, you know, the urban cores, but probably 9 p.m. to have amplified music in an outdoor setting seems more reasonable. If it's indoors, then, you know, they have a license and that's fine. But we've seen numerous examples of late of where this conflict is, where there's a conflict between close residential neighbors and these commercial establishments. If I could get a seconder.
I see Councillor Hirsch is seconding that. And so just procedurally, Mr. Clerk, we'll discuss the amendment first, yeah?
Yes, of course.
All right, who would like to discuss the amendment? Councillor Margetson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Was that an addition to number 15 then, or for residential neighborhoods? Or was that?
Yes, that would be an addition, I guess, to Schedule A, I believe.
So it would be number 16 then. So, and it includes residential neighborhoods. Would that require, then my question, would that require a definition? So that we understand where that would apply. Residential neighborhood, residential area, or resident.
residential neighborhood with,
Well,
well, I'll defer to staff to see if they can,
I say
recommend.
that, Councillor Maynard, because we did have a definition for a residential area. And hopefully that would make your amendment satisfactory, but I'll defer to staff.
So do we have a staff who wants to comment on that? Peter?
Sure. Yeah, so I'll take a stab at it. I think we need to clarify, I don't know that residential area will, we have a lot of areas where we have mixed. So we may have like lakeside zoned as highway commercial. Maybe perhaps what we should specify is where there are adjacent residential zoning to the property that may be commercial. Because we do have a lot of mix out there, and so just to say residential area, that could be hard for a bylaw officer to distinguish when they're out there trying to lay the law down, so to speak.
Yeah. Yes, that sounds good, the adjacent residential, whatever, I'll let you wordsmith that part, because I did have areas there, but I don't know whether it was neighborhood areas, so if, I have sent a copy of this potential amendment to the clerk, so if you want to just clarify the residential.
Yeah, we'll let the clerk work on the wording. There's a few other folks who want to comment. Councillor Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just not sure what we're trying to achieve again, because I think I want to understand the motion, but it's a commercial establishment in a residential area. So a residential area is, are we talking urban, rural, or just county-wide?
Who's your question to?
Whoever can answer it.
So my intent is for, not for, somebody that may be having a few guests over, but that for commercial establishments that are likely to be conducting outdoor having outdoor amplified music on a more regular basis, that there be some further restriction. And this is only for outdoor amplified music, not what would occur inside their buildings.
Follow up, Brad?
Yes, please. So you're talking county-wide, not just the urban areas?
Well, I would assume that most of the commercial establishments would be somewhere, but.
Can you give an example, Brad, of what you're thinking?
Let's say, I passed one here, is it the Red Barn, just down on Highway 33? That's in a rural setting. It's also residential. So, but they're set back far enough. I remember having this discussion back when, about the times of when we discussed the noise bylaw before, and we all settled on 11, and now all of a sudden we want to reduce it down to 9. And at that time, it was quite an uproar about exactly the time of it. And we all thought that at that time, 11 o'clock was the best time to put in there. So I'm just wondering why now, where are we putting the restrictions on, I guess?
Councillor Maynard, did you have a further clarification of the spirit of what you're trying to do here?
Yes, well, I would say that this has come from now that we have more outdoor amplified music probably than we've ever had, that the number of conflicts between opposing uses has grown substantially.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to turn it back to staff for a second. Just based on what you've heard, Peter, did you have any further thoughts on how you would massage this?
Through your chair, I think further to Councilor Wyman's concern, I under the umbrella of strictly just commercial, and that may not be the overall intent of what Councilor Mayor's trying to propose. I'm not sure of that, for sure, but I can definitely see that lending itself to be a problem where there's bigger areas. We have lots of TC zones where there are lots of space, and a lot of them are subject to site plan control, where, you know, sometimes there's already been mitigation factors into sound control. So, you know, to limit it to 9 may be like double whammy on that. So, you know, perhaps this needs a little bit more, if council committee desires, we can take this back and try to come back with some better wordsmith things to try to capture the intent spirit of what Councilor Mayor is trying to accomplish.
Thanks, Peter. I have a few other folks here. Let's get to Councillor Prinzen's been waiting patiently to have a say, and then Mayor Ferguson is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I don't know if we're still speaking on the proposed amendment, but I just want to say thanks to the staff, because when I read this, it was simple and easy, and there was no doubt. The time was 11 to 7, except for a few exceptions, which I was like, I envisioned when this report came forward, we were going to have a whole bunch of times and dates, and nobody would have understood any of it. So first, thanks to staff for that. And second, I'm on Councillor Nyman's side of this one, and I'm worried because of our deputations today, we're going to make a knee-jerk reaction, and I hate knee-jerk reactions. So, Councillor Maynard, I understand what you're thinking and what you're doing or trying to do if the amendment comes forward, but I just worry that we're going to be swiping the big brush and hitting people we don't mean to hit, and then it's going to be more of a mess. So that's why I won't support this. I love this simplicity of this bylaw, and again, I thank staff, because when we first started talking, I was scared what we were going to see. So those are just my comments for now. I may have something to follow up later.
Mayor Ferguson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, I guess to Peter, what's the definition of amplified music? Because we've got businesses operating on Main Street, Wellington, Bloomfield, Picton, that abut residential areas that have background music, which can be defined as amplified. Or are we talking about performance or what? Because I've got a significant problem of bringing this to 9 p.m. because of the effect it could have on those businesses. Mm-hmm. But perhaps you could clarify that, Peter?
Sure, through the chair, and Mike Kelly, if you want to add to this, feel free to do so after. My understanding is that amplified music is anything that goes through, you know, a microphone, through a power, through an amplifier, and it gets plugged in. That's my understanding, and I have chatted about this in the past, so unfortunately he's on vacation, can't speak to this directly, but that's clearly my understanding, that
okay.
Microphone, amplifier, and speaker would be involved.
All right, thank you. Then I can't go along with 9 p.m. It would have too much of an effect on our businesses. Thank you.
So we're going to go to Councillor Roberts, followed by St. Jean, and then Hirsch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's Peter Moyer made a good suggestion about staff taking this back and having another look at it in terms of what's intended. And I tend to support the perspective of Councillors Nyman and Prinzen. I hope anyway that most of us remember a time in our lives when our younger selves didn't start partying and entertainment till about 10 p.m. I hope we can remember that far back. And there's lots of young people and young at heart people where 9 o'clock is you're just kind of getting ready to head out. So let's not be sort of old fogies about this, and so that's where I'll leave it off.
Thanks, Bill. Councillor St. Jean.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur. Councillor Prinzen, you said everything I wanted to say with regards to simplicity and the KISS method when it comes to some of these bylaws that can get really complicated in the end. And I guess where I have a little more concern, yes, I'm concerned about some of the commercial that's surrounded by residential, But I'm going to use a simple example. Director Moyer brought up about a tourist commercial zone. What if that tourist commercial zone is also a wedding venue? Are we going to shut down somebody's wedding at 9 o'clock? I'm really uncomfortable with that. I think something like this takes it one step too far. So I can't support this kind of a change. I really can't. I think this is simple. Let's keep it simple. It's clear. Everybody can understand it for now. If there's a problem down the road, absolutely, we can always review it.
Yep.
But this is, in my view, much better than what we had before, and I think it'll do the job for us.
Thank you. Councillor Hirsch. Next, followed by Councillor McNaughton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following on Councillor Roberts' intervention, I'm generally getting ready to go to bed at 9 o'clock, but you know, I'm almost as old as you are. I do understand Councillor Maynard's suggestion here, and I would agree that perhaps staff could go back. We're just a committee of the whole here, so this is not the end of the road. If staff could, based on this conversation, perhaps try to find a way to deal with those situations that are likely to occur. But I would have a question too for staff at this point. All of this, the tables and so on, follow the general prohibition. Let's not forget, item 2 of the bylaw says no person shall at any time make, cause, or permit a noise that is likely to disturb the inhabitants of Prince Edward County. And that's not defined. And we've heard from some deputants today what disturbs them. And certainly, you know, those noise sources are likely to disturb. I'm not sure what the relationship then is between the general prohibition and then the time limits. And if that could be somehow worked into this, I think it would be helpful.
Thanks, Councillor Hirsch. And Councillor McNaughton is next.
Thank you. I just, I would agree this would be something that would be, that it would be a good idea to return to staff to work out, to see if there was something that could be worked out about proximity with residences, particularly taking into account the way sound carries over water, so that some tourist commercial entities might want to, or might be causing an impact on properties that they might not suspect are impacted by amplified music. So, but I would also like to point out that there are opportunities for waivers, because people can get special occasion permits for weddings, et cetera. So that should reduce some of the potential for those clashes with the bylaw if earlier exclusion is made. But I would support looking at some alternatives, and I would support staff having a crack at it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments before we circle back to the...
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Maynard?
Yes, so just to clarify, this is for outdoor amplified music only. It does not apply to indoor venue. And while I respect the commercial establishments' rights, I also think that we need to equally consider the rights of peaceful enjoyment for our residents. If it would make it more palatable, because this actually was not a knee-jerk reaction to the deputation we heard earlier, but more from some ongoing concerns, and they are in the built-up areas. So if it would make it more palatable to describe it from staff, however, you know, as hamlets, villages, and towns, I think where the buildings are in close proximity. It's the outdoor. We certainly can go indoors and continue with our fun well past 9 o'clock, but it is the outdoor settings, and that seems to be the crux of the issue with our residents, who deserve to be considered equally with our commercial establishments.
Okay, so what I'm hearing...
I'll change that to and maybe if it'll go back to staff and they can, but that it'd be in the urban areas, hamlets, villages, and towns.
All right, so let's just take a stock of where we're at here. First of all, Peter, yes, sir, go.
Through the chair, I'm not sure if this will change how you're thinking about how you might want to approach this. But something that one of the councillor mentioned about the general provision versus the more specific and prescriptive provisions in the proposed bylaw. The general is more or less intended to replace some of the items in the old bylaw that specify decibel levels or sound pressure levels. In that,
We've lost your audio, Peter. Peter, can you hear us?
No.
Peter?
Peter remembers it all.
Peter, can you hear me?
He's having to reconnect. Yeah.
He looks like he's rebooting or something.
He's connecting to audio.
sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep. I'm going to take it from the top.
Still there?
Yep. Why don't you take it from the top? We missed about 30 seconds. Like we're losing you again, Pete.
You try something else.
No, we got you.
Okay, good. Where did I cut out?
About 30 seconds into it. We missed about 30 seconds or thereabouts. So why don't you take it from the top?
Okay, so just to draw some distinction of that general provision that was raised up earlier in the conversation and whether or not that influences how you're thinking about this. So the purpose of that general provision is to allow the discretion of the bylaw officer to determine what's a disturbance and what is not. So in the old bylaw, there was specificity on the sound pressure level, or the decibel levels. So the trend now is that because that's hard to defend in courts because the instruments have to be continually tuned and I guess cases were being thrown out based on that the trend now is municipalities do not use a decibel meter to determine sound noise levels. And it's left up to the judgment of the bylaw officer to determine what is disturbance and what is not. So even though amplified music is permitted between up to 11 o'clock, it doesn't mean it can be blasted. So there is some judgment needed and required in part of the bylaw officer to determine what is reasonable and what is not. And that's the purpose of that general provision. So whether or not that influences how you want to deal with the possibility of commercial zones intertwined with residential zones and allowing for the bylaw officer to make that judgment call on what the disturbance and what is not. Maybe that will work on its own, maybe it won't. And as suggested by a different councillor, that perhaps if it doesn't work, then we can revisit it. So it really depends on you. I just wanted to draw that to your attention. That may change how you think about this.
Okay, thanks, Peter. So I think where we're at is, Janice, you had a initial amendment, and now you've tweaked it a little bit. Why don't you just give us the high level before we write it and see if you have a seconder first?
So because this is now leaning towards going back to staff for some consideration, I'm going to I'll withdraw that amendment and just ask that we refer it to staff to consider the issue of outdoor amplified music from commercial establishments, and then have that come back to us.
Okay, do you have a seconder for that referral?
So that we're not wordsmithing too much and
Okay, I think we got it. Ernie is going to second your motion. And yes, Mr. Clerk, do you want to clarify?
Yes, thank you, Chair Harper. I've written up a motion. I'd just like to read it, just so.
Yes, please do.
That council directs staff to investigate options available to restrict outdoor amplified music or entertainment emanating from a commercial establishment adjacent to an urban area, hamlet, or town between 9 p.m. on one day to 11 a.m. on the next.
She just withdrew it.
We may be, because we're only referring it back, that we maybe talk about residential areas, and then that will let staff, look at the full gamut. We'll just leave it open for them to look at the conflict between commercial establishments and residential areas. And they may come back with the urban, with the built-up areas.
Okay, so we'll reread that in just a second. A few hands have popped up. First, Councillor Nyman, and then St. Jean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's my understanding that we're referring the whole thing back to staff. The way I see it, it's wrote pretty good now, and as a couple of the other councillors said, it's very clear. People can follow it. I'm ready to vote yes on this. I won't be.
So you won't be supporting a referral?
No.
Fair enough. Councillor St. Jean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just the first step in the process. It's going to come to council before we approve any of this. So I guess I'm not sure who I should ask the question of, but can we not have this answer without having to have an answer to what we can do here or should do before it comes, like when it comes back to council, as opposed to referring it back to staff, which is going to take what, a month, 2 months, given our schedule?
Okay, I think Madam CAO would like to weigh in on that.
So, through the chair to Councillor St. Jean, it's true, if you refer it, it would come back to committee of the whole. But if you do nothing, if there's no additional motion, then this will only come back as a bylaw to pass at council. So I think what the table is suggesting is some work by staff to look into how this particular issue could be dealt with in the bylaw. And if you provide us some direction to come back when the bylaw is ready to come to council with another report, maybe that's the way to do it. So that you ask staff to look into the issue of amplified outdoor noise as it relates to residential areas before this bylaw is passed by council. And that way we can bring a report at council with some options and discussion, and you can make that decision and it would still keep moving.
Thank you.
Sound reasonable? Yes. Anyone else? Okay, so Councillor Margetson.
Just, I want to close out by saying that I think for Councillor Maynard and myself, we're kind of skirting around. We've had some fairly, what I would determine as fairly serious issues with noise in a residential area, people dancing around on picnic tables, singing loudly and disturbing the neighborhood. So all I'm asking for is, and I think staff will understand, is this adequate to deal with that? I mean, we're going to get complaints, we know that, whether it's 9 p.m. or 11 p.m. And I'm not looking to close any businesses or, disrupt a good party, because I'm in. But there's indoor, and then there's outdoor, and then there's little places where there's a lot of families in close proximity. And if you can be inside making a racket, do it inside, So that's all I'm asking.
Okay, so it sounds like we're zeroing in on a vote on a referral. Mr. Clerk, do we want to read? I'm not sure if it got revised slightly from CAO Wallace's comments, but do you want to reread what we're going to be voting on here as the amendment?
That council directs staff to investigate options available to restrict outdoor amplified music or emanating or entertainment emanating from a commercial establishment adjacent to a residential area.
Okay, so we're going to vote on that first.
If I may, Mr. Chair, sorry, the intent is not to refer any, like the entire report, but just this one section.
I think that's understood. That's understood. All right, so I'm going to call the vote on that amendment. All those in favor, please, hands up.
I have a question.
Okay.
Question, please.
All right, so just a procedural thing. I was just calling the vote, and Councillor St. Jean had a question. So should we go back to his question or his comment?
If you called the vote,
I don't know. Did I?
yeah.
People are saying I did, so
We
we have to stick with that.
Yes.
Okay, we have to stick with that, so can I again ask for, I didn't see it myself, so I need to see it. So all those in favor of the referral, please, hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
To be clear, it's
7.
not a referral now. That's not what the clerk read. It is not referring the whole report. It is asking staff to investigate this element in a report to council before the bylaw is passed.
Excuse me for the wording. Okay, so.
That wasn't in the motion. The report to council was not in the motion. That's what I wanted to ask Councillor Harper.
I believe.
I didn't have a report, it just says investigate options.
What would you like to do, Mr. Clerk, at this point? Do we want to reread it again? Mr. Councillor St. Jean, you've made your point?
All right, that
I
council
want to
directs-
be sure that it's coming back to council and not being deferred to another committee of the whole. And it doesn't say that specifically in the motion. And I would like it to be specifically in that motion before I can support it.
That council directs staff to prepare a report to council to investigate options available to restrict outdoor amplified music or entertainment emanating from a commercial establishment adjacent to a residential area.
And that be brought back at the next available council meeting as opposed to a committee of the whole? That's your point, correct?
That is correct. The motion needs to be specific to when it will come back.
And be brought forward to the next available council meeting?
We fine with that? Okay. All right, so I'm going to call the vote on what was just read. All those in favor, please, show of hands. And hold nice and high so I can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And Councillor Maynard makes 9, so that passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bear with me for 1 second. I got a lot of paper in front of me and I've confused myself. Okay? Okay, just a second. Where am I here? Okay, so I've lost my place, Mr. Clerk. Where are we at here?
So we're now on, we need to vote on the remainder. So that was an amendment to 6.2? Yeah. So we're back on 6.2.
Okay, so.
So we passed an amendment, but we need to talk about the rest of the
Okay,
items.
so let's continue with that. Thank you for helping me find my way. Councillor Hirsch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On a totally different subject matter, the staff report, and I'm glad that we have staff with us, the staff report has a discussion about noise from industrial sources and points out, and something I didn't really know before, is that industrial noise is governed under the Environmental Protection Act. And so they've included a paragraph in the draft bylaw, paragraph 5, simply noting that that is the EPA which governs industrial noise. So question for staff, and it's kind of a leading question, do we think that that provision, and I did read the material that was attached, as onerous a read as that was, and still didn't really understand, but I guess the real world question is, do we think that this is going to give us any satisfaction in dealing with the noise from Picton terminals, rock breaking and loading, which carries across the bay to the residents on the other side of the bay? Do we think that there's anything here that will help deal with that?
Staff have an answer for Councillor Hirsch.
Mike, do you want to take this one?
Well, my understanding is that if we receive a complaint, then that would be something that they have to contact the, it was the Ministry of Environment, and we would also be able to contact them as well, and it would be regulated under their license, is what my understanding is of that.
Councillor Hirsch, follow-up?
Little follow-up. So do we know, Mike, has that been done in the past, and has it been found satisfactory? Or are we in new territory here with our understanding of the EPA?
This is the first I've heard of it from this report here. I'm not aware of where we've contacted the Ministry of Environment before.
Anything else?
Good, so there's hope.
If I may, just because of Andy not being able to be here today, my interpretation of when he received this information from the consultant was that this was the person he had heard about it as well. So I believe we are in territory.
Okay, fine with that? All right, any other questions, comments? Councillor McNaughton?
Thank you. So just in Picton Ward, there are some uncomfortable sort of there is uncomfortable proximity between some venues for larger events and residences. And I'm just wondering, things that fall outside of amplified noise, which I was very happy to see that amendment, Councillor Maynard, so thank you for that, or that proposal, for sort of auxiliary noises that happen around businesses and venues that can cause disturbances for residents late at night. For example, buses picking up patrons at a venue, or outdoor noise. There's nothing, of course, regulating people speaking and people having fun. But is there anything within that provision, that general provision at the beginning, that can help with situations such as this, where you've got people piling out of a venue at 2 a.m. and making a lot of noise, and buses are running, and the buses themselves are making a lot of noise, and there are some locations where this is an ongoing nuisance. So would that general provision, would that give bylaw staff enough to step in and work with the business and see if some better outcomes could be achieved?
Mike? Peter?
I believe you could use, through your chair, section 9, which is the yelling, shouting, singing, and similar sounds. That would give the officer, or whether it's the OPP or the bylaw officer, depending on the time of day, it would give them the discretion at that point. Not necessarily for the vehicle running outside, but as for the patrons out on the streets and that such, I would say that it would give them discretion under section 9.
So okay, and for something like large buses running outside of a residential building, would that general provision be something that could be helpful?
Chair, I'm not really sure it would, just because I think that, that general provision relies on, the opinion of the particular bylaw officer and what is reasonable.
Right.
And, if the bus didn't have a proper exhaust system on it and it was super loud and running, that, yes, I can see that. But if it has factory installed sound attenuation equipment attached to it, then I don't think it would. It comes down to what's reasonable.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else comment on? Mayor Ferguson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to, I'd like to return to the industrial noise, if I may, for a sec, Peter. And this is really for clarification for me, but if I understand the report and what you've suggested, anyone, and this follows on Councillor Hirsch's comment, anyone who may be affected by noise emanating from Picton terminals, an industrial site, must direct their concerns to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks and/or the municipality, well, to them for enforcement, but also keeping the municipality informed. So it's up to the ministry to enforce this?
is our understanding at this point. Again, this is not an area that we have any experience in. We're relying on the consultant who is an expert in the field, and this is what they informed us. So it does sound a little bit obscure, and in dealing with ministries on other matters that require enforcement, that hasn't been a simple or expedient experience. So I'm not quite sure how this is going to roll out, to be honest with you. We have to rely on NCP to enforce this.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to, if I can get a seconder, I'd like to refer this or send this back to staff for confirmation as to exactly what industrial enforcement involves and who's responsible for it when the appropriate time comes.
Okay. Are you seconding it, Councillor Murgitson?
I am. And I'd like to add to what Mayor Ferguson said is to understand what the noise thresholds are under the Environmental Protection Act exclusive of a certificate of approval, which I think would be the case when you're doing auxiliary quarrying in relation to site preparation.
All right, so let's have a discussion on the proposed amendment by Mayor Ferguson. Anyone have something to wish to say or ask questions on? Do we like this idea? Okay, so do we have some verbiage exactly for this?
Can I please have the mayor or Councillor Marguson repeat the motion one more time?
I would like this sent back to staff for clarification as to the enforcement of noise in industrial sites, and that enforcement is a responsibility of the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation, and Parks. And as I say, is their responsibility, not the responsibility of the municipality. And Councillor Margetson has added to that to understand the noise thresholds that may be emanating or are allowed to emanate from sites such as that, but I'll let him clarify that.
Yes, thank you. My point was to clarify what the threshold is for contravention of the EPA with respect to noise when you do not have a certificate of approval, which would put limits on your noise. So there must be something within the act, or that's what I'm asking for clarification on. And I believe, if I understand the mayor correctly, this would come back in the same report, so the motion should say to come back to council.
Correct.
And not to the committee of the whole.
All right, we'll give staff a minute. They're typing furiously, and we'll see what they... An abbreviated version of all that I just heard.
I tried my best. That council directs staff to investigate enforcement of industrial noise threshold and whether this is a responsibility of the Ministry of Environment for contravention under the Environmental Protection Act, where no approvals have been granted to be brought forward to council at the next available council meeting.
Does that capture it?
Yeah, I think that captures it fine. Thank you.
Okay, so are we all clear on that? All right, so we have an amendment. Those in favor of the amendment, please, all show of hands. And that passes. Thank you. All right, are there other things we need to discuss with this, with item 6.2? Have we covered all our bases? Councillor Nyman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, so if there's no more questions, what do we can't really vote on it as it is that right? What are we voting on?
It doesn't sound like we're...
That's my job to ask there, Councillor Nyman. So yes, where are we at in terms of what are we voting next?
So we're voting on the recommendations as they are on the agenda, but it sounds like if we're, we may not want to rescind the current bylaw 900/2002, and that the proposed bylaw that is on this agenda likely shouldn't be passed at the next available council meeting. So I would recommend that we're voting to just receive the report and the amendments that were approved.
Okay, so do you want to make that official, and then I'll get the hands in the air on that one?
So that council receive report DS 177, 2021 for information, and that council directs staff to prepare a report to council to investigate options available to restrict outdoor amplified music or entertainment emanating from a commercial establishment adjacent to a residential area and to be brought forward to the next available council meeting. And that council directs staff to investigate enforcement of industrial noise threshold and whether this is a responsibility of the Ministry of Environment for contravention under the Environmental Protection Act where no approvals have been granted, and this to be brought forward to council at the next available council meeting.
Sounds like he's captured it to me. We good with that? Okay, all those in favor? Show of hands. And thank you, and that carries. So 10-minute break would be appropriate?
Yes.
Committee members, see you at 3:10.
Jude. No, do you want me to email all this?
I got the first one, but not the second. That's all right, I can take my time.
Oh, that's okay. It's hard.
Fantastic. Do you have Sirius XM? Do you ever listen to the B.B. King blues? Yeah.
If they offer on the noise, so blue goes
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for this, sir.
From them? Yeah. No, he from about the grid.
It is a blues foundation. Yeah.
Yeah, no, from the grid, that's all. I don't know. And I don't give a shit if nobody complains. They can fucking dance on the roof and sing all night, but if people are complaining. It's your first complaint, actually, you.
Yeah.
Who? You. Guthrie. No, it was Brian Marie.
Yeah, yeah.
The lakeside motel complaint and all that stuff. It's just took up so much time. And like the first guy didn't even know.
It is, isn't it? It started off a little cool.
How's your birthday?
It was good.
Yeah.
It was good.
Did the gift come or not?
No, it's not. My parents wouldn't go on that puzzle.
You got 3 puzzles?
No.
You're going to be so busy.
That was good though. This has been fun. You ate well.
That's good.
How was your night?
It's all right. I just went home. I was supposed to do all my minutes. I ended up watching Dexter. Like, I should probably pull up a laptop and just type. It's just too tired to do anything. So I'll do it tonight, hopefully. 'Cause I don't want to do any work on the weekends. Like, most of them, it's like, you know, review them one more time.
I get that. It's just,
Spell it shouldn't take too long.
You can always send it to me.
It's like, I don't want you to.
Sometimes it's good to have a
Yeah.
second set of eyes.
Well, it's like 5. I have a huge list of minutes to do. But yeah, tomorrow's the conference.
Okay, hang on.
But I don't have an extra half a million.
It's all off.
Pardon? I don't have an extra half a million. You don't own it either, so that works out fine.